Hello and welcome to What Keeps You Awake.tv. It's time again to dive into the hustles, the hurdles, and the highs that keep small business leaders up at night. I'm your host, David Hooser, and I'm fortunate to welcome today's guest, Ray Hughes.
Glad to be here. It's an honor.
We're glad to have you, buddy. Ray has owned and managed martial arts schools for 40 years. His early years were full of punches.
It wasn't good.
He learned that business and martial arts have a lot in common, and especially the concept of getting up after you've been knocked down. So Ray, welcome to the show.
I'm excited about this.
Well, let's get started with our foundational questions and we'll take it from there. So tell me, as a passionate individual about martial arts and an experienced individual in the world of business, what keeps you awake at night?
Man, is that a great line? What keeps you up? When I first heard that line, actually, there's different stages of business, and each stage is a different nightmare.
Absolutely.
So when I first heard that line, I had like 5 or 6 nightmares that popped in. But my current nightmare that I'm working with is making that transition from school ownership,
Okay.
being 70 here pretty quick, and moving into the last stage of business life.
Okay.
And for me, that is trying to look into the insights and understandings and wisdoms and philosophies of those who've gone before to pass on to those who follow.
Right.
And the way I word that is interesting. Martial arts, everybody understands the word sensei.
Right.
Most people think sensei means teacher, but it actually doesn't mean that.
Okay.
Sensei is 2 words, sen and sei. Sen means before, sei means person. So sensei means one who's gone before. It's a
Okay.
very honorable title.
It is indeed.
When I started understanding that concept in both business and martial arts, it started to make sense and it started to become easier. So getting back to my nightmare today is, as I make this transition, I want to make sure I can get that information from those who've gone before me and pass it on to those who follow.
And
that is both business and martial art philosophy.
and that's what I was going to get at,
Yeah.
because this is a topic of business, but there are a lot of business channels that you can pursue. So making sure you have a sensei in business and as in whatever focus area, like in this case martial arts, you may have, is critical. So
Well, like we were talking earlier about those people that get into business that have no business background, you have a lot of strikes against you right off the bat.
right.
And unfortunately, because I mentor young people to consider business as their dream, is they want to quit before they start because they don't know how to go about becoming a businessman.
Right.
So when I started in business, I owned with a partner an awning manufacturing business. We went from 0 to 40 employees up to $2 million. We started with 0
Right.
in a burned out building downtown Phoenix as an office.
Wow.
And we grew that, and we ended up failing after 5 years because, one, I didn't have any formal experience. I was
Right.
just doing stuff. And I learned the concept of growing too fast. We grew too fast, and what happened is you have productive people doing productive work. All of a sudden you get more work, and all of a sudden you have to hire more people. Now you have productive people now being unproductive because they're trying to bring unproductive people online.
Up to their
And it
pace,
just
right.
snowballs, and we ended up going out of business. And actually,
And HR issues,
mm,
they become a much bigger issue as you go from a few employees and maybe your partner and your first employees to managing the needs and the issues related to 40.
yeah, that was powerful. I don't know if I mentioned, but neither one of anybody in my family's never been to college. So I'm the first one.
Right.
And I didn't go to college till 26. So from 18 to 26, I am learning through sales. That's how I got
Okay.
out of the
All
mines.
right.
Everybody should do sales. I hated it.
Where's home? You mentioned the mines.
Miami, Arizona. Globe
Miami, Arizona. Okay.
Yeah. So
Copper mines or
third generation miner.
right.
Never thought in my wildest dreams about ever being in business. So I get involved with martial arts, and my instructor was an entrepreneur. And so I started hanging with him. We became best friends, and I started seeing things, but I wasn't really educated. So we had that business. We bought a liquor distributing business. The alcohol was good.
I was going to say.
But that was a tough business, and that one didn't make it either. And I learned the value of there are bad people in this world. So
Right.
what we thought we bought wasn't what we bought. So that was a good learning experience. So that awning company closed down. I've already been doing martial arts for 10 years. And I said, heck with this stuff. And this comes back to what we talked about earlier about if you're going to be in business, you gotta love it,
You
and
gotta
be
enjoy it.
passionate. And I thought, I'm just going to do martial arts. I
Right.
love it. In that time, back in the 70s and in the early 80s, there were no full-time martial arts schools. There were the little strip schools that you see even to this day.
Right.
Very few are full-time instructors.
Right.
So there was no foundation to say, oh, I could make money at this. So I just said, heck
Follow
with
this
it.
model.
I'm just going to do
Right.
this.
Okay.
And then as I started the business development, so the beginning of business and the beginning of martial arts are almost exactly the same. Martial arts, you start learning basics. You've been there, you've done
Right.
that, learning technique.
Right.
Business is the same way. You got to start off, what's the dream? What's the plan? How am I going to go about doing that? And there's a lot of planning that has to go involved
A
starting
lot
a
of thought
business.
goes into it.
Yeah, a
Building
lot of people blow
a
that,
base.
right? Not
Right.
planning well.
Right.
But then all of a sudden you get into competition, because I had a competition career, and you start that concept of competing, going against people you don't know, fear, anxiety,
Like in
highs,
business.
lows.
Like in business.
And
Right.
it's exactly like business. And all of a sudden I'm looking at both these things, and I start taking these principles of martial arts and putting them into business. One, business has to be structured like the military. Everything's got to have its place.
Right.
It got to have paths. It's got to be well defined, just like martial arts. You got all the different belts and protocols that you have to
Right.
follow. Then you have to recognize who's your enemy.
Okay.
Business, you've got enemies, right? They're
certainly
your
do.
competitors.
If you don't have any enemies, nobody's doing it. There may not be a market for it.
There's
So
probably no market.
yeah.
So then you got to analyze your enemies. Then you got to find out their strengths and weaknesses. What are your strengths and weaknesses? And you start that process.
Right.
And like I said earlier, every one of these stages has its own nightmare that goes with it.
Well, in the military too, there's the idea, and you're inundated with the mindset development of team,
Yes.
because you aren't going to win a battle on your own. So you need a team with you to implement the strategies to win. And same with, especially with the team. And I think that's
Team
a
is
part
huge.
of what a lot of our entrepreneurs today are missing and they don't know how to build a team, or they have the wrong team. They build their team through social media. I mean, you need to
Yeah.
find folks, like you said, that your sensei, your peers that will truly contribute to your efforts.
You know, men are probably the stupidest business people in the world, because most of the time
Well,
we
my
don't want
wife
to ask.
would certainly agree with you on that.
Because most of us guys don't want to ask for help.
Right.
I won't even ask for directions.
Exactly.
Man, how stupid can you be?
Right.
And so at one point, I was in Japan, and I been in business for 10 years. I'm just getting along, nothing big. And I was learning Japanese, and I was at this restaurant, and I heard them calling the person Sensei in the back of the restaurant. And I thought Sensei was a martial art term. It's not. It's used in all fields.
Right.
And that was the boom explosion in my mind. I need senseis in accounting,
Yes.
finance, real estate.
Yes.
And so what I did was I came back and asked for help. So I sent a letter out to my student base, and these were all wealthy people up in Scottsdale. And I said, I need to buy my own building, but I don't know how to do it. I have no money.
Right.
Can people help? 5 dads stood up, helped me out. We
Right.
got a building built. I borrowed $100,000 and paid $50,000 back in interest and consulting.
Right.
My dad thought I lost my mind. He was, that's loan shark stuff. I said,
Right.
sometimes you got to take risk. And when
That's
you
right.
don't have the money, you got to pay it. And even though he never could understand the concept that when I built that commercial building, I instantly had $300,000 in equity.
That's right.
Now I had to sleep in my car for 10 years
Oh, well,
to make the
yeah.
mortgage, but that's beside the point.
No, but that's actually the essence of the point is those sacrifices you made,
Yeah.
the risks you took, resulted in ultimately you having two very successful schools
Mhm.
and being able to come here and sit on this show and talk about the journey that you made to achieve, what you've achieved so far.
But I would have loved to had some business people give me a little more direction at first.
It
Just a
helps.
little bit of insight would have really helped. For instance, one thing I would have liked to know is that it's an ongoing process of paying forever. There's great fun in the whole process,
Sure.
but it is a struggle.
Sure.
And like we were talking about earlier, it is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you don't think that way, it's not going to work.
And you've got to have concept of
Yes.
many, many, faculties. You can't just be a great, martial arts
Yeah, know
leader,
everything.
and you have to be, like you said, an accountant.
A
You have to
janitor.
be a marketer. You have to empty trash cans if that's what today is asking for. We have an event later on today, and the team here we're going to leave and change out our shirts and become movers and facility
cool.
set up event planners. Whatever it takes, we're gonna
You have to do it all.
set up. So
I've been asked, well, how do you teach people how to become an entrepreneur? So my karate classes, I'm a very philosophical teacher,
okay,
So I'm talking to students and I'm talking to them and saying, I really highly suggest that you consider business as an option. If you want to be a doctor, great, own the hospital.
right.
Think big and take a dream and go on. And they said, well, what if I have a dream? What's the first thing I should do? And I said, let's start with this. Say you want to open up a bookstore. You love books. What do you think the first thing you should do? And kids would come back with 10,000 answers. I said, nah. If it was me, I'd go down and I'd volunteer at a bookstore for a year, learn everything about that
Intern.
bookstore,
Right.
inside and out, because there's so many things in business that you don't see that you need to know.
Right.
And you can learn on other people's dimes. And then you take that principle and then you start moving from there.
And it helps you from, like you said, if you work for someone in a business related to, the field you want to go into, the business you number one, you get paid to learn, as opposed to going into debt, which is what most people choose to go and sign. So I think that model's great. As a matter of fact, my son has just started his own business at 22. So, but he doesn't have that experience. He's been working, worked through high school, worked through, he graduated high school. He did a little bit of school, but he was so passionate about IT services, about tech. And so now he's moving forward in an IT services company.
Well, the thing with him, and this is, if you are fortunate to have been born in an environment or your family or friends that are
Exactly.
business oriented, there's things that you absorb in that you don't even think about.
That's right.
It's when you're not, when you realize, I know nothing about anything. And so he should have a good shot. He'll be successful if he'll listen. That's the big thing. When I
Listen
was
to
young, I didn't listen
everyone.
well.
Yeah, listen. I mean, you don't have to do everything you
Right.
hear, but you should listen to it. Make sure you get a basis for other opinions on how things should be done. That's one of the challenges with, I think, social media today.
Yes.
It biases us, supports our opinion. And what I want is people who contrast my opinion, who
Yes.
tell me something different to make me think and really expand my thought processes. So, and you have to do that as an entrepreneur.
And you have to do that all the time.
Right.
One of the fears I've had at different stages is, am I seeing what I think I'm seeing in my business? Is it operating right? Like the last few years of my life was, God, I'm almost 70 years old. Am I aging out from my
Right.
population? Like the people that make most of the decisions in a martial arts school are young women that are like 25 to 30 years old with a
That's
couple young
interesting.
kids. What does a 25, 30-year-old woman think about nowadays? What color turns her on? What words does she want to hear to motivate her to put their child in a difficult art.
That's the demographic you
Yeah.
pursue.
So you have to
right.
always keep learning. I don't know when that stage, when I went from I thought I knew what I was doing to realizing I don't know anything.
Right.
So ask everybody, especially those that you respect. Because one thing I've learned is know with business people, and I've known a lot of business people over my years, they'll tell you how to be successful for
Right.
free.
Right.
I tell my students, you want to be a doctor? Go hang with those doctors. They'll show you exactly what you want to do.
Surround yourself.
But business people will know instantly if you're a fraud or not. Because if the minute they think you're not going to be all in and do it, they're not going to help.
Right.
They're not going to waste your
What's
time.
in it for them?
Those dads that helped me, even that guy that loaned me $100,000 so I could put it on that building, he didn't do anything. I still had to go put my jacket on, go
That's
to a
right.
bank after 20 banks getting declined every time and thinking this is
Knock
not going to
down,
work.
knock down, knock
Yes.
down.
And son of a gun. And then the funny thing, you'll appreciate this as an owner. So I got the building and it's an SBA loan. So I guaranteed the money if I meet certain parameters. Cash flow. Well, my cash flow wasn't high enough. So they start building the building and I start running commercials on Channel 12 and all
Right.
these commercials. And it's not happening. I'm not gaining fast enough. And this building's getting closer and closer to being complete. I'm going, what am I going to do? You know, I'll figure something out. Right when the building was complete, 9/11 hits, the interest rates crash, qualified for the loan.
Interesting.
And it took 4 years
So
to get from the stage of starting the building to complete, the same length as most traditional schools it takes to get a black belt. And that's
Interesting.
very interesting. But man, you talk about some dark days. So, yeah. But like we talked about before, if you're not all in, you can't. I don't think you can survive.
Right. And those challenges are going to come. It's
Oh,
funny.
yeah.
You mentioned the marketing. I know in the early stages of my online school, it was secondary ed. So post-secondary, university level learning through online platforms was moderately, received and
Yeah.
accepted in our society. But online learning for secondary, for middle school and high school kids was, parents, except for our early adopter parents of homeschool, parents. It's like you said with
Yeah.
your martial arts school, it was the mom in most
Yes.
cases calling us to
Mhm.
look for, So it's funny, we started all of those online strategies for marketing, Google and, and Bing and Yahoo. And I learned every imaginable way not to market during those years, because I watched, campaign after campaign fail to generate what we put into the marketing, effort. So it's pretty funny, the things, but we didn't give up. Eventually we had an enrollment of almost 30,000 students a year. But those early years of watching $100,000 spent on, in your case, you started with that building and marketing ads. And in my case, we mostly were online, but watching campaign after campaign not generate. And everyone, of course, they always tell you, just be patient. It'll come.
That's what they
But,
say.
you go to you ask a bank to loan you money for a Google ad campaign. They don't do that. For a building, at least you got a chance because there's something you're building. It was tough. So we struggled through those years too.
Well, and the people that I encourage to consider business as a career, the thing you have to do, regardless of anything, is you've got to get some marketing background.
Yes.
You've got to go to college and take marketing, because without that, you're going to fail. You need to get into sales. My dad was a military guy, and I remember him telling me he thought all young men should serve in the military for a couple of years for discipline and that. Well, mine is all young people should be in sales for 2 years.
Oh, okay.
Man, you talk about brutal.
Yeah.
And I was raised to hate salespeople,
Right.
from a small
Right.
mining town. And here I am. I'm a salesman because I didn't have an education at that time. And what can you do without an education? Well, you can get into sales.
Right.
And so I was in 3 or 4 sales jobs. I quit every time right before they were going to fire me for not being good enough. But I started learning communication skills.
Exactly.
And the funniest thing, and this is what I learned that helped me in sales, which moved into business. So I'm at my last sales job and I'm getting ready to get fired. So I took the head salesman out. He was an ugly old dude. And yeah, he was the number one salesman in the company. So I took him out for lunch and I'm crying in my soup. And I said, I'm going to have to quit. And he was laughing at me. And then he said, you want some advice? I said, yeah, anything you can help me. He said, all those books that the sales manager gave you, just get rid of them, throw them away. I go, what? He said, get rid of that garbage and don't ask for another order. I go, what? Against all concepts of sales? He said, nah, just be authentic, go in there, have fun. Go and talk to people.
Right.
If they need something, you can give it, but just have a good time. Well, that took the stress of making cold calls out. But then I said, well, I'm going to just go have fun, walk in, get my card. All of a sudden, I saw how things started to work. You're authentic. People will talk to you. They'll tell you what you want. And as I got into martial arts, trying to make that my business, those are the things that would come back in my mind. Okay, nobody wants to be sold.
Right.
No one wants to be sold. So you have to have a presentation, and you have to be able to sell your dream.
And you are the presentation.
Yeah.
I tell everyone, and I'll say this to our team, all things being equal, I do business with my friends.
Yes.
So if you're not my friend, there better be a good reason why I'm doing business with you. But if you are my friend, then you've got, an opportunity. You've got access.
I like that.
So all things being equal, people tend to do business with their friends. So yeah, that's one of the biggest things you have to learn as an entrepreneur.
Huge.
I know when I walk my dog, and I'm sure you're the same way, I look at people coming my way and I say hi to everyone that comes by. And not all of them say hi back, but the ones that do, it just makes that part of your day that much better, that much more special.
Absolutely.
And the same thing, you've got to be ready to receive everyone who comes your way. And as an entrepreneur, that I think is one of the things. People think I can build this great thing and everyone will buy it. And they'll find out the hard way that no matter what, but if you have a good personality and mindset, and like you said, you most of our tech entrepreneurs, startups, they come with incredible ideas.
Right.
But I've seen great ideas, businesses go under because they didn't put those basics in, like you're talking about, build those foundations. That's one of them.
It was interesting. I was raised in, like I said, Global Miami, and we were raised to hate rich people because rich people stepped on the backs of the poor. Okay. You're in a small mining town, that's how you're taught.
That's a concept, right?
You hate people from big cities because they lie and cheat and stuff like that, and so on and so forth. So here I go, and I'm starting this martial arts school in Scottsdale, which is, oh my God, the
rich people in the
hell
city.
of all life lives in Scottsdale.
Right.
And so then I started meeting all these people, and most of them were entrepreneurs, and business people. And they were really happy.
Right.
They were outgoing. They also contributed a lot to help people. Charity work and stuff. And the main concept I got from all these guys, so I started hanging with them. We'd go out for lunch. We'd talk about business and stuff. And I was getting how these people talk. They were just like you just said. They're happy people. They love what they do. They want to help anybody. They're not what I was raised to think. Very interesting, isn't it?
That's true. And that, you could apply that to most of the concepts, the things you learn. They're not always true. And
no, not always.
They could certainly vary by region. And that's the other thing, because we grew globally, and every culture that we had to learn the culture to really be successful in that market. I mean, we got the invitation because we built a great program that was scalable. It was, implementable in their physical schools. So we could take our online platform and embed it into their physical school, world. But we had to learn. Every partner was different. And my son, you talk about learning in the environment. He learned as I would sleep, because I told my partners, and I had 24 global partners around the world, from the Middle East to Eastern Europe to Western Europe and South America and Asia and India. I told them when my partners called, I was there.
Yeah.
And because I was the business in that, in their minds, because that's the way they make decisions. And so I would always have Skype or WhatsApp or whatever
Yeah.
ready to ring, and I'd wake up and talk to my partners at any time of the day. So those are the kind of things that really differentiate. My school was good, and we were using technology that was leading edge, but really came down to me and my mindset of always be ready to engage with whoever is needing your time and attention. So
It's interesting because it really comes down to the simplicity of customer service.
right,
Your partners come first and stuff. So when I talk to young people about considering, entrepreneur or business person, is when you got to love what you like. You got to be able to communicate. You got to care.
right,
You got to be authentic.
right,
Because without that, you can't go very far. Everything else can be learned
right,
or spelt out.
replicated.
Yeah. And again, like we were talking earlier, if you are not working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on your business in one form or another, you're not going to make it. So when I first mentioned that to students, they said, well, I can't do that. I said, well, I'm not talking about work. It means if I'm watching TV in the evening,
Right,
and I'm watching a commercial, I'm watching that commercial and saying, who are they talking to?
right.
What are they trying to get you
Would
to
that
think
work
and
for
feel?
me? Would
Yeah.
that message, would that
Mhm.
delivery, does TV work for my business?
Exactly. That medium,
Right,
the message, the messenger,
right,
what I like, what I don't like. And then you get ideas.
right.
And what I learned early on too is I keep writing those ideas right in my book while I'm watching TV because they pop up. And then being elderly now, I'll forget quick if I don't write it down.
It's a necessity today.
Yeah.
It was always helpful, but today it's
Oh,
essential. Well, this is kind of we're at a point. This is great conversation. I'd love to talk some more. I think you have a podcast, so we'll cover that on a future episode.
Absolutely.
But I ask, and along those lines, at this point, are there any shameless plugs, or how do people get a hold of you, or what would you want people to remember after this
The easy
episode?
way is through my schools. I've sold them, but I'm still. Matter of fact, I have a bell exam I have to sit on.
Okay.
Being the elderly guy, you got to do that kind of stuff. But that's Scottsdale Martial Arts Center, which is SMAC.
Okay.
Isn't that like SMAC? It's a good.
Smack. It's a good one.
It's actually Smack Us because
Smack
we had to get
Us.
United States, so I could get the .com.
Okay.
So Scottsdale Martial Arts Center, if you want to take your kids. I have all ages and stuff, but I'm passionate with youth because this world is crazy and youth need more skills than they've ever had.
And more attention, and more discipline,
God.
and more,
Yeah.
more adult time, more mentor time.
And tell the truth. One thing I love about children is they can handle it.
Right.
Life isn't fair.
Right.
Some of us aren't 6 foot tall and play basketball.
Right.
Some of us, and enjoy the unfairness of life and laugh at it. If you can do that, we're going to be fine.
All right.
But you have to work hard. So that's my shameless pitch.
All right. Sounds good. Well, we appreciate the audience for joining us today. If you would like us on whatever podcast medium you're using now, or find us on any podcasts that you commonly go to at whatkeepsyouawake.tv, and we'll catch up with you again on a future episode.
Great day. Thanks.
Thanks.